you snooty, misogynistic, old-fashioned, mansplaining men in your tired old newspapers. Shut up.
Breaking right now. We knew it was only a matter of time. The loose women have spoken out after their axing by woke ITV. And wait for it, you won't be surprised to learn that they blame misogynistic male executives and mansplaining for their downfall, rather than the fact that this once iconic show, which was loved by millions, has gone completely woke, pushing agendas down our throat, including, by the way, accusing me of racism for calling out their all-black panel when they believe that they should never have an all-white panel. But this hit back started with Jane Moore in The Sun this week, who wrote that the Loose Women cut sparked outburst of lazy misogyny from mainly male trolls who have no idea why the show's so important. Lawrence Fox responded, saying the UK version of The View Loose Women seems to be running out of people who can be bothered to watch it. Thoughts and prayers with those who have bills to pay and children to feed who have just lost their jobs. Welcome to the cancelled club. But it was actually Nadia Sawalha, the Loose Women columnist, who has decided to go public and acknowledge that TV is dying, that these loose women people have lost their jobs as a result of the fact that people just don't want to watch this woke bullshit anymore, but at the same time has decided to target men, male executives, and mansplaining for the fact that women are switching off from this rubbish. So we're going to get analysis on this from our superstar panel, June, Slater, and Howard Cox, as we go. But first, prepare the Nadia Sawalha diatribe. Let me just tell you, by the way, she's sitting next to her husband, Mark, during this, who seems at times, somewhat ironically, to be mansplaining to her. Watch.
Loose Women's Jane Moore hits out at snooty reaction to ITV's brutal daytime cuts.
Yeah, this isn't. Well, that's from somewhere actually different.
This is
isn't
in
it?
The Sun.
But her
Loose Women cut sparked outburst of lazy misogyny from mainly male trolls who have no idea why the show's so important.
Exactly. And then she goes on to talk about, though we aren't a political show, we have the politicians on, and they're usually very scared.
Yeah.
In fact, I seem to remember years ago when Farage came on, and actually probably somebody would be able to find it, because there was a pap photo of, as he came in around the back of ITV studios in his car, there was a folder with something like things to talk to women about. Yes, it was. Yes,
to talking to
yes.
women.
Somebody see now if they can find it. It was years ago. Not a guide. It was a folder.
But I like to now imagine him with a 1947 guide of how to liaise.
But it was something like that. You know, they get very nervous because they don't know what we're going to ask them, because it will be something out the blues.
Well, I'm just going to call bullshit on that one, because I actually spent a whole load of time last night looking desperately to see if Nigel Farage had ever been paparazzied going into Loose Women, holding a folder saying, this is what to talk to women about. Didn't exist. So that's made up, number one. And trust me, Nigel Farage is perfectly capable of talking to women. But Nadia Sawalha hadn't finished there. Watch.
Jane says, you know, since the cuts were announced, the amount of hostility from people that you can tell don't even watch the show, misogynistic puff, you know, and it's the way people almost hold their nose like this. You know, this show has been highly successful for 25 years.
Yes, before you went woke.
It is such a clear brand. Loose Women is mentioned. How many dramas, how many programs around the world? It is, you know, and Lorraine, how long has Lorraine been there? You know,
Well, I mean, I worked on the Lorraine Kelly show for 10 years. That was how I got my big break in TV in the United Kingdom. But unfortunately, something changed on these shows. The woke mind virus entered ITV. They sacked Piers Morgan for slagging off Meghan Markle. They told me I couldn't tell the truth about Meghan Markle. They sacked lots of white presenters and said, we have to replace you with someone who's diverse, not because of their talent, but just because we're appealing to the woke mob. So I'm sorry, I think what Nadia, Sawalha and Jane Moore are missing here is that Loose Women has finished because their viewers switched off. Nadia got very emotional though.
The brutality of the world, right? To see what a lot of people don't realise is that we're self-employed. Loose Women is self-employed. Every contract is a new contract. I could be let go tomorrow. I could be let go in 5 years. You don't know because we're not employees. So I can't tell you anything other than I'm on for my next contract. Nobody will tell me any different. It's never been any different the whole time. But what's been brutal, absolutely brutal over the last week, and honestly, I feel tearful about it.
What's the production?
Is that hundreds of people were made redundant, are going to be made redundant out of the blue.
Hundreds.
These are all the people behind the scenes, right, that support us in every way. You cannot have one without the other. But it's just the way of the world. Inflation is insane. Cuts have to be made, and I know you guys will be feeling this within your families, and with many of you will have partners or yourself have been made redundant.
No, you're completely missing the point yet again. The reason the mainstream media is failing is because the mainstream media is no longer representing the vast bulk of the population. Remember, the brilliant era of Loose Women was driven by a woman called Carol McGiffin, and Carol McGiffin left the show because her anti-woke views were no longer accepted. And so you're only representing a tiny portion of the people who used to watch your show. And these staff members who've lost their jobs, and I'm not saying some of them are not good people, I worked with some of them, but unfortunately, they have decided to perpetuate this myth that the vast majority of Brits want to go down a woke path, and we don't. Nadia does then admit that television is ending. However, she loses it later on and decides that it's mansplaining to blame for the attacks and failure of Loose Women, and, wait for it, misogynistic old men. But first, the reason you're watching this show is that it's becoming increasingly difficult to trust mainstream media or the so-called fact checkers who claim to determine which facts are true. And for good reason, given the ongoing debates over free speech, the controversy surrounding Brexit, and how Trump and other anti-establishment politicians are portrayed. So I have the solution. It's called Ground News. It's the best way to stay informed and cut through media bias and manipulative narratives so you can get the facts for yourself. It's been a game changer for a news junkie like me, and you can see for yourself at ground.news/outspoken. So let me show you this incredible website and app in action. Let's take the recent landmark decision by the UK Supreme Court that ruled that women can only be biological adult human females, reversing years of trans extremism. You can see clearly in one place that over 360 sources around the world are covering this story. Ground News instantly shows how the story is being covered by the media, broken down by whether it leans left or right, illustrated by its biased distribution chart. And if you scroll down, you can actually see every headline about the story along with the political bias and ownership of the publication. So quite clearly, you can see like great coverage from the Daily Wire. They gave a really good headline. UK Supreme Court rules trans identifying men and not women. Loved what Spiked Online and the Daily Telegraph did too. By stark contrast, however, the left-wing National in Scotland said the result was only a victory for gender-critical feminists, and the Canary ran with like just a nutty headline. Victory for the far right as Supreme Court rolls back trans women's rights by 2 decades. I mean, you couldn't make it up. My favourite feature is the blind spot feed, though, on Ground News, which surfaces upwards of 20 stories daily that receive the majority of coverage from one side of the political spectrum. So if you love the news, like you know I do and I know you do, the blind spot feed is the best way to get a balanced perspective on what's really happening. So go to ground.news/outspoken, or you can scan the QR code on screen if you're watching on YouTube and Rumble to subscribe today. You will get 40% off the same Vantage plan that I use for unlimited access. Big discount that. So that's ground.news/outspoken. But now, back to the show.
I can't tell you how upsetting it was to see people just walking around numb with shock and fear about what they were going to do. And, you know, television is coming slowly, very slowly to its natural end.
Not slowly.
Like so many professions are, aren't they? And there's so many people, not just in show business or telly, that are looking at like, what am I going to do next with my life? What, you know? And so that has been so awful. That's been worse for many of us than whatever horrible things that trolls say about our shows that we all feel, you know, really protective of. So I'm so proud of Jane for just calling them out. You know, and these are a lot of newspapers writing vile things, just like they always have for the last 25, 26 years. Oh, we're to this, we're to that. You know, every single day, the sidebar of hate picks up on something that somebody said or a look. You know, you hate this one, you hate that one. Just shut the fuck up. Just shut the fuck up. Actually, do you know what? At the moment, all of us on screen are in work and are proud of what we do. But behind the scenes, there are people that are really suffering. And what you don't realize is when you attack the show, you attack them, because you never see all the army of people behind the scenes and how hard they work. So to all my friends and colleagues behind the scenes that just got the most huge shock out of the blue, I'm so sorry. And Mark knows, don't you, how upset I've been at home about it. I just can't bear it. So just be fucking kind to people, you know, and all you snooty, misogynistic, old-fashioned, mansplaining men in your tired old newspapers, shut up, or at least just watch it once from beginning to end, because that's the awful thing. You've never watched it and you have these opinions.
But also, one of the other things they seem to misunderstand and not understand is it's meant to be a show in which opinionated women express their opinions. And I would argue that so many shows on television just don't have that. You don't get that anyway. You don't get. There's no show with everything is but also everything is so blancmange and sort of average, which is why this would be my proposition. Of all the brands that ITV has, the one that lends itself best to a hugely successful digital presence. I know they have a YouTube channel, but I mean with content that's geared towards the digital market, is Loose Women. Everything that's clickbaity is people with strong opinions on all of the topics that you talk about. This is the future.
But that's what a lot of the men that are in charge of legacy media do not like. They don't want to be a difficult woman is very irritating.
I mean, June Slater, our very own Loose Women, by the way, I'm sorry, this is ludicrous. Like, I know the executive who was in charge of ITV Daytime and Loose Women for years and years and years. It's a woman, right? But it's one of these women who is on the left. She's called Emma Gormley. She's very woke. She is the one who's instigated all of these changes. So it's totally ludicrous to say, oh, this is the fault of men. Loose Women, June, has lost about half of its audience. And that's because it used to be fun. It used to be outrageous. It used to represent everyone. And they made this purposeful decision when they hired the likes of Charlene White to become politically correct and to become woke.
They need to accept they're boring. I stopped watching it because they were boring. They were boring the bloody pants off me. And I thought this was supposed to be about outspokenness and people having an opinion. And unfortunately, probably people like myself and Lilani Dowding and other outspoken women who've decided to take to social media. I mean, I cover a number of topics. I just take the rip out of people. you've got someone like that with 450,000 followers, and Lilana with a couple of 100,000 followers. There's that other girl, I can't remember her name, 300,000 followers. You only need a few people like that, and people will gravitate to that because what they want it. Katie Hopkins. If anybody should be on Loose Women, it's Katie Hopkins.
Totally. And she used to appear as a guest, June, which is interesting. They never quite allowed her to be a full-time Loose Woman. They would have her on as a guest. Could you imagine now? She would not get on in a million years. You wouldn't get on. Lilani wouldn't get on. No. They only put on one type of woman.
And it's and they're paying what gets me with these people, I find this really, really insane. And that is Lawrence Fox got cancelled. He was an actor. He didn't want to be in politics. It's not the place for him. He's not happy there. He'd be happy being back in acting. And Lawrence came out and said that Britain wasn't racist. And for that one comment, this hideous industry of lovies and woke people, this hideous industry, nobody stood by him, not one actor, nobody said anything. They all kept quiet so they could keep the jobs. They took his equity card off him the day after, I think, and nobody said anything. So maybe now these people can realize that what we should have done was stand up then we had a right to be who we want to be when we're in the media, rather than being this force-fed narrative preaching, wet, woke, he said it, blancmange, vanilla, whatever you want to call it, nothingness. Carol McGiffin was one of the best ones. I always used to watch if Carol was on. I liked the way she put her information across. She was balanced. She was logical. She represented how I felt. They don't represent how I feel. They talk about, I think, are you really having this as a topic? How boring. You're boring. You've got the axe because you're boring. You're going to have to deal with it because you people like that have allowed this industry to be taken over by woke. And what do they say? Go woke, go broke. That's where you're heading.
Howard Cox. I mean, I couldn't agree more, Jim, by the way. Howard Cox. Don't you think Nadia is also being so actually like pretty sexist by saying yet again, this is the fault of the man. It is the mansplaining. It's the fault of the misogynistic old man. And it's like, no, the people who are writing these articles about loose women are women. The editors of the magazine that puts these bitchy articles about loose women on the covers are women. As I've just said, the boss of ITV Daytime is a woman called Emma Gormley. I think this is one of the problems and one of the reasons why people have turned on loose women, because it's like they want to say that every issue is always the fault of a man.
Well, I'm one of these white old men. Sorry. I'm one of those people. And honestly, I mean, I've been in Good Morning Britain quite a lot of times, and I've been in the studio afterwards when it goes to Lorraine, they get the whole thing. And I've often been spoken to producers. They said, would you like to be on the show later? I said, well, I'm happy to, because obviously I'm doing it for the campaign. And like June, I don't do it for money. I've been doing this just to help people, have a cheaper, driving. And when I talk to them, the producer comes in and sits down with me and interviews me and says, look, what are you going to talk about? I said, well, you've asked me to be on it. What would you like to say? And this was on the loose women thing about female drivers and male drivers. And they were trying to split me, to put to a situation about that. And as soon as I mentioned, I don't believe in there's a climate change crisis or we don't need net zero. As soon as I say that, oh, thank you very much. It's very nice of you to be on. Bye-bye. So you're dead right, Dan. I mean, there's no way a man, especially a white man, can actually do anything on ITV in the morning times anymore.
100%. Well, I was really disgusted the other day, and I actually broke the story. Sammy Woodhouse, who has been an incredible force. She's a force, isn't she? She's now on Rupert Lowe's rape gang inquiry. She previously had appeared on Loose Women. There she was, right? She was there, and they put her forward as a Rotherham survivor. Now, she was booked, right, to appear on Loose Women, and she was on the train on the way down. And I knew Sammy, and I just said, they're not going to have you on. This is not going to happen. You will not end up on that show, because since your last appearance, you have gone on to work for Tommy Robinson and Urban Scoop. But she obviously took what they were saying for granted, and she'd been on the show before. What happened, Howard? On the way down, They cancelled her. They lied about the reason for cancelling her. They said, we're going to do the entire episode on Linda Nolan. Don't worry, we'll book you again, because Linda Nolan had died the night before. It was all rubbish. They did one tiny segment on Linda Nolan. There were lots of other guests. And guess what? Sammy Woodhouse has not been booked again. And I think that shows you where they're at.
Well, I've got to know Sammy a little bit through Rupert and what they're doing, and she's a tour de force. She's an incredible person, and with her background, she's worth listening to.
Absolutely, and they should have had her on June. But this is the point. They will only have now guests or topics that fit their worldview. So, for example, on the day, June, of that historic Supreme Court ruling, remember, where the rights of biological women were protected, enshrined in law, Loose Women didn't cover it at all. The next day they came on and they'd clearly thought about it a lot, and they said, this is a really difficult issue to talk about. And it's like, it shouldn't be, should it? Shouldn't 5 women on or 4 women on a panel, shouldn't this be your issue?
Well, this is how batshit bonkers it gets. I mean, what's she called? Yasmin, wittering on
Yasmin Alibi Brown.
I have a friend who's trans. I see her on Facebook. You wouldn't know. She's slender, slim, small. You wouldn't know. And she messaged me because she knows what I'm like. And she said, listen, darling, I hope you don't mind, but I shall still be using the ladies. No one will know. I'm going in for a pee and that's it. And I laughed at that because I thought, well, you'll get away with it because no one would question you. You look like a girl. But she doesn't believe it should be the God-given right. And she's absolutely mortified at how politicised trans issues have become. She went through all this on her own. She had a sex change many years ago when you didn't get any support. There was nothing there. She doesn't believe that it's a God-given right and that, these men, some criminals have actually come out as trans after they've got arrested. There was one in Scotland. He wasn't trans beforehand. This will get abused. So the court ruling is absolutely essential. Men are men, and women are women. And you need that dividing line because people...
Yes, of course you do.
People who are trans necessarily,
of
people
course you
will
do.
abuse
but
the
it's
opportunity.
The fact, June, that a show called Loose Women was actually too scared to discuss that. But look, we'll give the last word to our Loose Women, Nadia Sawalha. Watch this.
When these newspapers just dismiss us all as just like, I don't know what, old bags, as Jane says in her piece, old bags. Sorry, we cannot identify with what you are talking about there. Because when you say that to us, you're also saying that to our audience, don't you? You do realise that you're insulting our audience and potentially the people that buy your newspaper.
I just honestly don't think it's what it's about. I think it's a very intellectually dishonest argument, if I'm totally honest. But thank you to my superstar panel today. She certainly isn't an old bag or a loose woman. June Slater, thank you so much. And of course, make sure you follow June on Facebook and subscribe to her YouTube page for so much more of this. And Howard Cox, who is, of course, the head of the Fair Fuel campaign, former Reform UK mayoral candidate, and who knows, maybe we'll be hearing more from Howard Cox in the political space in the weeks to come, and I know he'll be back to tell us much more about that. Thank you both so much. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.